Hey everyone, welcome to Chess on the Brain with National Master David Bennett. So today I wanted to show you a really cool position. This is an example of building a fortress, or what Andrew Soltis calls in the art of defense in chess, building a defense perimeter. So you could call it a fortress, a defense perimeter, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a way of ensuring that your opponent can't get into your position. Let's say you're down material, or you're afraid that they might get to your king. You need to set up a fortress and make sure that you blockade them. And then the game will be a draw. So this is an example of a way to save your position. Now, if you're playing with the black pieces here, what would you do? I'll give you a little bit of time. I always say to my students, first things first, don't just look at moves, fully understand the position in front of you. Really understand what's going on here. What are white's prospects? What are black's prospects? Look at the pawn structure. Notice any imbalances, the Silman thinking technique. The main imbalance that you'll notice is there's a knight against a bishop. There's slight differences in the pawn structure. You can see that black has a little bit more space on the king's side, especially with that pawn on f4. And you see that white has a little more space on the queen's side, in particular in the center, because of those pawns. Things are locked up though. This is what we call a closed position. Now in a closed position, there's interesting possibilities. They're not boring positions. You often have really interesting resources for offense, for attacking, and for defense. So take a look at this position. Think about, what is white trying to do? What is white's threat here? Something that would make you pretty uncomfortable if you are playing with the black pieces. Also look at your own capabilities. Do you have anything really dangerous as black? I mean, sure, your main breakthrough would come in the form of pawn to g4. It doesn't necessarily do too much, and obviously with your queen sort of offsides over here on a7, you wouldn't be able to really facilitate any dangerous action over here. I mean, obviously you'd like to attack the g2 pawn. So that's black's main prospect. As for white, think about what white wants to do. Once you truly understand what your opponent wants to do, and I often talk about how that's a differentiator. That's what really helps people move up to higher levels. When you truly understand what your opponent is able to do, you understand the nuances of the position. You understand their position like it's your own position. I think of the board as almost like water. It's like water flowing through the board on both sides of the board. It doesn't matter what side you're on. You have to understand where the weaknesses are, where that water can flow. Fully understand the position. So if you're playing with white, for example, put yourself in white's shoes. Maybe white can do something pretty annoying. Do you see it? So maybe you pause it. If you want to pause it, go ahead and pause it more if you want to think about it before going forward. So here's the thing. White can push here. That's going to break through. Now you say, okay, fine. They want to push. I'll just move my king here. Seems like a reasonable attempt. Can they still push? Yeah, white actually has a really interesting sacrifice. Just go ahead and place b6 anyway. Now, you can't take with the queen, since the knight is guarding it, so you have to take with the pawn. And now, what can white do? See that juicy square on b5? Just waiting for the queen to invade the position. And that's basically over. Whoever enters the position first in a situation like this should win. And you can see that once the queen enters, she can plunder everything in the position. Not to mention checkmating threats. Maybe she comes here, and then the king has to go back somewhere, and then the knight will enter. I mean, that's destruction. And once the queen comes in, all these pawns can fall like ripe apples. So in a closed position, if you can invade, think of it like a facade. Think of it like this house. It's like a facade of a house or a kingdom, right? But it's really just a Disney show, right? So if you can get in, you can destroy everything within their position. So you can see the power of a sacrifice like b6. Even if the king is able to, it seems like they can stop it, but you can't. So given that black doesn't have anything really strong at the moment, and white has the potential to play b6, you say, okay, well, if I can just stop that, I think as black here, you'd be happy with a draw. So how can you stop it? This is the key move. Now, once we fully understand the position, we know what's going on, then we can think about the actual move that we'd play as black. Now, we did consider king b7. But we looked a little deeper, we saw that's a little uncomfortable. So we might have to make an unpredictable move as black here. Maybe you already see it. A lot of times the most brilliant moves, whether attacking or defensive moves, are the most unpredictable moves. They look like blunders, right? So you're going to hang your queen. See it? Queen to b6. Looks like a crazy move, but you've built a fortress. You've secured your defense perimeter. So now there's no way that white can push the pawn. Okay, white can win the queen, yeah. But this is the cool idea. One of these really awesome situations that arise in chess. Now the only way that white can try to get through is by pushing what? The h-pawn. So yeah, if white doesn't push the h-pawn, this is going to seal it up. Seal the deal. No way in. So white has to try this. Now black has to tread carefully here. There's two options. Pretty much in chess, you always have to choose between at least two options. But generally, to make a good decision, never just look at one move. I always tell my students that you have to have two candidate moves. And then you do essentially you're teaching kids how to do a cost-benefit analysis. But basically, yeah, you're weighing out the pros and the cons of two options. That's what chess teaches you to do. So in this position, would you take with the bishop or the pawn? I think one of them might get you into trouble. One of them definitely seals the position. If you take with the bishop, you can imagine that the queen might try to enter on this diagonal. So the queen's got to rush back. Let's say the queen goes here. Okay, you can get the push in, no big deal. The queen's going to come here. Now that's, yeah, the queen's going to break in. No more fortress. So, yeah, you have to take with the pawn. Now the queen's still going to try and come back somehow, trying to enter onto the light squares. We always need to think about the most delicate aspect of the position, all the nuances, every single way our opponent could potentially break through. Because I mean, hey, we're down a queen for a bishop here. So after this move, what does black do to seal it? Right, you got to push the pawn. Now if they take, of course, this move completely seals the position. Absolutely nothing white can do. Actually, if they try something tricky like going here and try to take the bishop, well, then they might lose if you get a passed pawn coming in. So they have to, actually, white needs to tread carefully in some of the situations. For example, say the queen comes here, hoping that you'll take, opening up some lines for the queen. You just push. Now this queen essentially needs to babysit this pawn. She's got to just stay here. Maybe the king could come over to help. But yeah, by that time, the black king would easily walk over here and secure everything where it's open on the king's side. So you just have to be careful. You have to make sure you have the accurate follow-up. So when you play a move like queen b6, not king in b7, because we looked a little deeper. When you play queen b6, you have to make sure that it looks like a cool idea once you notice it, but you have to make sure the follow-through works. Actually, it's interesting. As a comparison, this game Capablanca versus Treball in Carlsbad, 1929. So in this game, which I love, I want to analyze this game at some point. You see, it's a similar pawn structure here where colors reversed, where Capablanca is trying to break through. He's trying to break through, or this will be on the queen side. But you notice that he's also breaking through on the king side. As it turns out, he seals up the king side, but only after he's sure he's going to break through on the queen side. So this is basically an example of how you sort of preempt the blockade, ensure that your opponent doesn't get a defensive perimeter. So after this was cool, using tactics. Takes, you can't even take back because the push discovered check and winning the bishop. So what he ends up doing is he ends up breaking through, but he has to make sure it works. He gets his breakthrough. It seems like black is holding on, but this is cool. So he ends up maneuvering a bit. He finally just really hits that weakness on b7, and that's critical. Bishop a6, bam, taking advantage of this. Okay, you're giving up a great bishop for a bad bishop, but the key is to break through. And once he breaks through, and you can look at the rest of the game, I really recommend looking at just knowing that game almost by heart. Just know all the concepts in Capablanca versus Treball. That's how you can break through, how you demolish a blockade. Now in this situation, white's about to demolish the blockade, but that's sometimes why you need to be incredibly resourceful in chess and play an awesome move, which makes the game so beautiful. To be able to play a queen sacrifice like that, being confident in your analysis, knowing that even after something like this, don't take that way, you play this, you seal the position, and you secure your draw. Let me know if you have any questions, and just keep that idea in mind of the fortress, because it just shows you that there's always resources. Got to keep an eye out for your resources. Make it incredibly difficult for your opponent to win if they have a winning position. If you're a good defender, you could keep on throwing traps at them, and hey, at some point you might even be able to turn the game around. But in the case of a fortress, you should be able to secure the position and hold your draw, and well earned after playing an awesome move like Queen B6.